The crew chief for the number 9 Ford, driven by Marcus Ambrose for Richard Petty Motorsports. Drew Blickensderfer joins us. Hey, Drew, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, guys.
Hey, we just got to hear a clip, which I don't think you got to hear, from Jimmy Johnson about winning the 700th win for Chevy. And you're back in the Ford camp here to try and do something about that. Are you happy to get back out of that bow tie group there that you were hanging around with for a little while and get back to something that you might be a little bit more familiar with, the whole blue oval?
Well, I'm not happy to get away from the Chevrolet as much as I'm excited to be back in the blue oval with the guys I'm used to. You know, the Chevy people are great, but the guys at the blue oval I know from the past, and I'm excited to go working with them again.
How much support is there? How much back and forth do you have with the manufacturers like that? You know, we made a little bit of fun about that, I guess, but is there a relationship that you've had with, you know, guys from Ford and they give you a certain amount of information and then you had to kind of change and talk to, you know, some new people? How much information is there being passed back and forth?
Well, working at Roush for as long as I did, and Roush being towards the end there, the main Ford team, Ford was directly involved with us, and I probably had more communication directly with Ford than a lot of teams have with their manufacturer. Jamie Allison was around regularly. Pat DeMarco, who runs the NASCAR side of Ford Racing, he's around the technical side of it. So those guys that on the technical side, and then the guys at Ford were around a lot more than what probably the Chevrolet guys are, since they're more spread out. So I got to know them very well. In fact, this weekend they all made visits to the 9 Mac Tools hauler to come see me and hang out with me for a little bit and say hello. So that was refreshing to kind of feel like I'm back at home.
We're talking to Drew Blickensderfer, who's the new crew chief for the number 9 Richard Petty Motorsports Ford for Marcus Ambrose. And Drew, you're going to work with Marcus, for the first time. Ambrose has a lot of experience as a race car driver, a lot of success, but not traditional stock car racing success. He's done well. He's won a couple of races since he's come over here, but he's got a different history than the most of the guys that are in the circuit, I would think. What's your feeling going in? Do you have any kind of preconceived ideas of how you might work with Marcus going in? Is anything different with a guy like that who comes from the Australian Supercar series and more of a road racing background than a traditional circle track guy?
I think maybe a little bit. They're a little different. I think the neat thing about Marcus is he is extremely open to me asking him about his driving style and asking him about this, how you doing this, and staying on him in the race, about not overdriving a corner. And there's a lot of drivers you work with that you know they don't want to hear that stuff and don't take it as receptive as Marcus does. And Marcus reminds me a lot of Carl Edwards. I worked with Carl for a long time in Nationwide and been around him for a long time. Both of them are very, their temperament in the car is very similar. It's calm. They don't get riled up on very many things. So it's definitely something I knew about Marcus, kind of being next to him when I was in the Roush camp. And then it's definitely something I look forward to working with him. And, he came in Monday morning. He said, what did I do wrong? What can I do better for you? How can we get this thing better? So it was good, and I'm looking forward to it.
Drew, Charlie and I always talk about the crew chief driver combinations and guys who work together well and guys who don't work together well. And you were just talking about what a good relationship you had with Carl Edwards and how the two of you had an understanding of how you wanted to go about doing things. Is there a formula that makes these things work, or is it just by guessing, by golly, and you throw a couple of guys together and they either work or they don't?
Well, I'm not sure if there's an exact formula, but you see a lot of the good race car driver crew chief combinations complement each other. One's the pump up guy, and the other one's the real hard nosed guy, and you see that like in Chad Canales and Jimmy Johnson. And, Chad plays one role on the team and Jimmy plays the other role. And if they're both trying to play the same role, they overlap and they don't get as much accomplished and as much out of themselves and the people around them. So I think there isn't a direct formula, but there's definitely, if you look at a lot of the great combinations in the past, one of them's being the cheerleader, whether it's the crew chief or the driver, or sometimes after a pit stop, and the other one's getting on the guys. So you have to have that yin and yang and good chemistry to get the most out of the employees and out of each other.
We're talking with Drew Blickensderfer. And Drew, you came in with 3 races to go here at Richard Petty Motorsports. What do you hope to accomplish in these last 3 races going into 2013?
I think the main thing is to learn everybody's name. That'd be goal number 1. And then and just evaluate where the program is. I told Marcus during the weekend. We got off a little bit in happy hour, and I reached in the car and I patted him on the leg, and I'm like, man, we're going to be okay here. And then after practice, I reminded him, I'm like, man, I haven't seen these cars. I don't know if these are what I think is the best stuff we have to bring to the racetrack. We're just getting to the racetrack. So the performance seems a little to us, but just me getting together with Marcus and the team and making sure when we get to Daytona in February, we're hitting on all 8 cylinders. We don't want to get there and miss anything. The point system is so set and you've got a good foundation after the first 10 races of the season. You don't want to give up the first 2 or 3 getting to know each other. So me coming in for the last 3, hopefully that gets us a head start, gets me prepared to build these new 2013 Fusions for next year, and definitely gets us on the same playing field as the combinations that have been together for a bit.
Drew, NASCAR is changing their testing rules for next year, as I understand it, and you're going to have a few more races where you get a chance to test. Is that a bigger deal for you going with a new team, working with Marcus for the first time? Are those testing dates going to be more important for you than they would be, in a more stable situation, I guess? Yeah,
I think it will. I think a lot of teams can go to Nashville and test and places like that, and if they have a race car driver they're used to, get some useful information from that. But being new, we might not get as much information from that to help us at other racetracks. So being able to get to the actual racetrack, find out Marcus's lingo. I mean, that's one thing I went through during practice and during the race was, when he talks about the handling of the race car, I got to be able to understand that and translate that into getting the car better. And I think we did that halfway through the race. It took us a couple adjustments. Halfway through the race, our car started getting better, and we started running in the top 10, and things were looking good. And that's just a learning curve that Marcus and I are going to have to go through. And going to 4 racetracks next year that we race at will be a big plus in that.
Drew, you talked about getting to know the people there, about getting the machinery that you got, getting to know that. Are you able – how do you go about doing that, figuring out which cars are good, which ones you're going to be able to work with? Is there some way you're going to be able to do that, or are you just going to have to do some testing during the off season to find out what you got?
Well, I'm a big believer that the people at Roush Fenway who builds our chassis and hang our bodies are really reliable and do really similar things on every car. And I think that the things that make race cars drive good or drive bad at certain racetracks are a lot of times just setup related. And so I went through the cars today. That was one of my jobs today. Now that the Phoenix cars are already gone and out there, going through today and helping make a inventory list for next year. I looked at a lot of different factors. You look at your newer cars. You want to keep them around because they usually have less damage, less patchwork, less repair work, so they end up being lighter, a little nicer pieces. I looked at cars that ran well this year at certain racetracks, and things like that. And that's kind of just what I have to get my hands around and start really working on is the inventory. When you're at a place for a while and you're established, on the back of your hand what's coming through the system and which cars you have that are good and quote bad. But not knowing, I had to really I leaned on the car chief, I leaned on the engineer, I leaned on the shop foreman, and then I went through myself and just did notes and looked at history and I had to try and understand it and get the best pieces for next year.
Drew, I think one of the things that that fans don't really have a good handle on is this satellite team relationship between. You were a longtime employee at Roush Fenway Racing, and now you're at Richard Petty Motorsports, which is a satellite. You just mentioned in a comment a couple minutes ago that you're confident with Roush Fenway building the engines and hanging the bodies on the cars, but if there's speculation all the time that maybe the satellite teams don't get the best stuff. If you weren't, would you be able to tell? I mean, is it something you can tell week to week that Carl Edwards has something that you don't have? Can you tell that, or is it just a feeling thing?
Well, I think some satellite teams it's hard to do that with, like Furniture Row and RCR. I mean, one's in Colorado and one's in North Carolina. RPM and Roush are across the street from each other. I was at work today for 11 hours, and I bet I spent 3 of the hours in Roush Fenway's building.
Okay.
It's extremely comfortable for me to walk in the 17 hauler during the weekend and talk to Jimmy Finnig, or to walk in the 99 or walk in the 16. I have a really great relationship with those guys. They all wanted me back in the system to work at RPM, and that's one of the reasons RPM hired me, is because my relationship with Jack Roush and Robbie Reiser and the people at Roush Fenway Racing is still on good terms, and I'm welcomed in their haulers and to ask questions, to look at their cars. I was in Roush Fenway's R&D department this morning looking at spindle stuff, just to go over things with the engineers to make sure. So I think because of RPM and Roush Fenway's proximity across the street it's basically on the Roush Fenway's campus. Because of that, because of my relationship with the crew chief and the general manager and the owner at Roush Fenway, I think it is easy for me to understand if Carl or Greg or Ricky Stenhouse or Matt Kenseth or whoever is getting more or different equipment than I am. It'd be pretty easy for me to pick out. And knowing Jack from when I worked at Roush Fenway and knowing him now, he has a vested interest in seeing those RPM cars out front, and he wants him to win almost as much as he wants his own cars to. So I don't think that would ever happen.
Drew, thanks so much. We appreciate you spending time with us. Best of luck to you the rest of this year, and we'll be watching next year as well.
Sounds great. Thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Drew Blickensderfer, new crew chief for the number 9 for Marcus Ambrose at Richard Petty Motorsports.